Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Unk and Few, man. I think we're episode 11 right now. I'm not 100%. We're 11 or
Dude,
12 going into week 12.
this is
How
week
you doing,
12.
Unk?
So this should be episode 12. I can't believe what's
Mhm.
happened to the NFL season, man. It's just like disappearing. I cannot believe this is week 12 already. Seems
Man,
like just the other day was Labor Day, man.
I swear, man. Seems like just the other day we were prepping for season 3 of our show, man. 3 seasons, bruh.
Yeah,
Take
yeah,
that
dude.
in, man.
Slowly putting in the work over the years.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. By the way, people who are coming in on the back end, everything, watching the replay, like the video, like the stream. Best way to support us. And as you
Yeah, man.
can, share, comment, subscribe as much you can. We're gonna have our little late bloomers in the chat. You know, our boy Rob, Sleepy, they're gonna be coming
Yeah.
in a bit later. And we're gonna have a really, really fun episode. You know what I mean? And get into it. We gotta get into it, man. We gotta get
Definitely,
into it.
man. Like, share, subscribe, and get in the comments for real, man. There's nothing we like more than to extend the conversation.
Absolutely. Best way to conversate, man. And we gotta conversate. I hate to do this. I hate to do this. But we gotta conversate about what happened last week. And unfortunately, I'm mad. I'm mad at you, John Harbaugh. I'm mad at you, Todd Munkin. I'm mad at you, Ravens defense. And you know what? Let me
You
start
know
off with
what? Don't you dare say it. Don't you dare
I
say
gotta
it.
say
That
it.
was their
I
best
gotta say it.
defensive performance of the season. They
I'm
held the
not gonna
Steelers to under 20 points, and the Steelers are no slights. It's not like the Steelers can't score points, right? So I
But
was
brother,
waiting for you
let
to
me tell
say
you
that. I was going to say the one game. This is the big irony
the
of this
one
game.
game.
The one game that like Baltimore's defense did what you thought they should do, and they just wasn't enough.
Wasn't enough, man. And you know what? Now I owe this is the problem. The big problem is now I owe Unc some beers. I owe him a
That's
drink.
it. Well,
Now I'm
I
mad.
believe
You
I
know what I
believe
mean?
it was just one beer, but it's all right, man. Well, hey, listen. You'll get your chance to go double or nothing, man. Because I mean, you're
Oh,
coming to
we have a
town to
chance.
watch Steelers Baltimore, man. So we'll see where it's at the end of that game.
We're gonna definitely leave that surprise for the people. I want them to be surprised when they see our next game with the Ravens versus Steelers on December
Yeah,
3rd. But I will say this, man, as a Ravens fan,
well,
hey, brother, at the goal line, with the 2-1,
yeah, you're coming in and out a little
Lamar
bit.
had
Yeah, your mic is chipping in and out a little bit there. Your audio, but anyways, well, listen, man, I'll just tell you that was a hugely important win for the Steelers, but it basically settles nothing, right? The Steelers padded their position on top of the division a little bit, but their biggest success in all this was the wild card factor that we had cited last week before the game went down. And that was that the big question was it came down to whether or not Tomlin could succeed in bottling up Lamar Jackson. And he most certainly did do that. The big thing that the Steelers really showed in this game was what you call the Steelers showed a lot of gap discipline, meaning like their defensive lines held their positions in the gaps that they needed to cover. As well, they also sealed up the edges, right? So that put Lamar and Derrick Henry both in the position of the Steelers saying, like, go ahead, run. We want you to run. Go ahead. But they had it defined into a certain parameter so that they couldn't really get into that secondary running state where they had open field. So yeah, the Steelers literally managed to contain those two, and you saw, you saw the results, right? Just watching that game, it really sort of appeared as if the Steelers were sort of in charge, throughout. So once again, right, you got to chalk it up to Tomlin because I mean, what else is there really? right? I mean, it's absolutely an inexplicable result compared to every other game Lamar's played this whole season, right?
Straight up, straight up. Testing. I just want to check. How's my mic working so far?
Sounds great now.
Okay, okay. Some audio issues on the back end. Thank you, Unc, for covering me on that. The key, like Unc said, man, Unc football is absolutely right. The key was this fourth down, sorry, second point, 2 point conversion after the
Yep.
touchdown by Zay Flowers. And the situation, man, look at the time. There's about 12 seconds. No, my bad, my bad. It was like about 12 or something. It was like about a minute left in the game past the
Yep.
2 minute conversion to 2.1 2 minute warning, sorry. And at that point, man, Mike Tomlin did the smartest thing. Mike Tomlin called that timeout to see the formation and the
Yep.
play that the Ravens were going to do. And what happened was either Todd Monken or John Harbaugh did the same formation, the same play, and players were confused, man. These guys didn't know what they were doing. And guess
Yep.
what they did? The Steelers did. The Steelers blew it up. Joey Porter Jr. with the tackle of the game, getting
Yeah.
on Lamar's behind before Lamar could do Lamar magic. You know what I mean? And the craziest part, Steelers held our Ravens to how much was it? Probably like 15 points, something crazy like that. And let me tell you something. Tomlin, you are the MVP of the game, but so is this man right here, Mr. Boswell, the kicker for the Steelers,
Oh
man.
yeah.
He was the man. Think about this. Who would have thought in their right mind that 6 kicks would have determined the whole game? Ooh, ooh. Tell
I
them on
listen,
as a
buddy.
Ravens fan, I was pissed, but Boswell in.
I
Talking Chris.
listen.
Like what?
I've seen it before in the NFL. I remember, I think it was 2000 and like 14 or 15.
Right.
I remember the kicker for San Francisco back then. I can't believe his name eludes me right now. But anyways, about 10 years ago, the kicker for San Francisco won me not only my fantasy week, right, but the game. It
No,
was this weird game where they won 2015. And he had 6 field goals, right, for 18 points. Plus, there was like, a defensive play, like they caught him in the end zone for 2 points, right, for a total of 20. So I've actually seen it in the NFL, and that result didn't surprise me not a little bit. Because
yeah.
again, just like the black and blue division, the NFC North, when we get to discussing the other side of this conversation, when we get to discussing the Thursday night game, you see it again, right? The division gives and the division takes away, depending on your perspective and depending on the team that you're cheering for. But
Straight
that
up.
game was
Straight up.
everything that I thought it would be. And yeah. I mean, as a Steelers fan, you can't help but be encouraged by it, right? I mean, but I'm gonna segue, dude. I'm gonna do it for you, dude. I'm just gonna segue out of the pain
Go ahead.
segment into your joy, which is the Steelers' loss to Cleveland on Thursday night, right? So, what does that do to the division, right? What
Man,
it does is it actually makes it a little bit more realistic, right? Like
yeah.
anybody, like it's hard. Like the Steelers at 9-2, like they should be, but it just does something about it. Just doesn't add up, right? 3 games ahead of Baltimore, running away with the division. I don't know. Somehow it just doesn't add up, right? Something had to recess, right? Something had to regress, and that's exactly what
Man,
we got. I'm going to chalk
yeah.
it up to. I'm going to chalk it up to the emotional hangover on a short week of having beaten, Baltimore the way they did, and then having to get up for Cleveland, in the middle of a snowstorm and all this stuff. But I'm not going to Pickens this, right? I'm not going to blame the weather, right? Because both teams had to play in the weather, right? And yeah, so I mean, that was just to me that game, that Cleveland game. Like I'm not even mad at Cleveland. I barely even touched on the highlights. I just said, whatever, just get over it, right? Move past it, because that's exactly what the Steelers need to do, right? That to me was an emotional letdown after the emotional high of beating the Ravens and then on a short week and whatnot. Because the Steelers showed all the signs. If you looked at the stat sheet, you'd swear the Steelers had won the game. And if you watch the fourth quarter and you see them rallying, which I did not, by the way, like, um, like you saw them rallying. You saw them rallying. I just had a feeling that this was a trap game and that the Steelers were going to have a bad game. That's why I didn't watch, and sure enough, it was. But anyways, yeah. And the Steelers again, like the Steelers could have won it, except for Tomlin again. Tomlin tried to get a little bit too slick, trying to outcoach and outmatch and outmaneuver his
Yeah.
opposition when he failed to take that 4th and 1. Now I guess he figured that they were going to go for it on 4th and 1, so he
Yes.
figured, or they were going to kick it, one of the two. But he figured that putting them, refusing the penalty, putting them back on 3rd down, but from the 24-yard line instead of the 19, was going to somehow, you know, make a difference. But it did make another difference, man, because you basically gave them 2 more shots,
What?
psychologically. We
Yeah.
got 3rd down and we got 4th down if we don't get it. To me, it was the wrong maneuver. It went against the grain of all coaching strategy. So I'm just going to chalk that up to Tomlin trying to get, I don't know whether he's been reading his own headlines or what, but he tried to get slick and it didn't work. Right. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So the Steelers really gave it up when they shanked the punt. Right.
Oh
If the
yeah.
game
Yeah.
had gone to script, they had taken the lead 19-18. They should
Yeah.
have buried Cleveland deep in their own end, right? At the 25, 30-yard line at minimum, right? And then
Yeah.
allowed the weather and their defense to prevent Cleveland from getting into field goal zone, right? Just clamp them down. They only had 3 minutes and 22 seconds to do it, right? But instead of getting that opportunity, Cleveland got the ball on the 45, Pittsburgh's 45. Huge
Yeah.
difference, huge difference. And the Steelers, to all their credit, they really kind of kept the drive in check. They weren't going too hard, too fast. They weren't like, it's not like they'd completely broken the Steelers until
Mm.
Jerry Jeudy got that 3rd down completion. Right, the third
Yeah.
down that
That was
the
when it
third
changed.
down that Tomlin had
Changed a little
given
bit.
them.
Yeah, it changed. It took a turn when he got that reception, and the return of Nick Chubb, man. Nick Chubb was very clutch in that game, especially in the
Yeah.
fourth quarter, because they
Well,
needed those. They needed a power running type of performance
in
because
that
as Michael
scenario,
highlighted,
especially.
in the snowstorm, in a scenario like that, you have to
Yeah.
rely on your big boys and your running back. And I think letting him get that, I don't know if they let him get that touchdown, but it looked like that was when it would ice the game. You can't give, and as great as Russ has been playing all season, bro, Russ is not the type who's gonna do a last like one
Yeah.
minute drill to take it down the field in a
Yeah.
snowstorm, brother. You know
Yeah.
what
It's
I
not his
mean? Like,
brand.
that's not him. And you know what I'm saying? I don't like this is something that as great as Tomlin has been all season, I didn't like sometimes when he put Justin Fields in the game. I'm like, okay, I respect it, I feel it, but like you're getting a little too fancy. Let's stick with Russ in this one. Let's
Yeah.
trust Russ in this one because guess what? You have to put it on Russ's back. He's been now he's leading into a 5-game winning streak, something like that. Obviously, they lost this game, but I'm telling you right now, Russ is the bend and don't break type of guy. He'll maybe mess up a little bit, but he won't break your entire
Yeah.
offense. So for me, I'm be real, man. As a Ravens fan, I was like, I had a slight smile on my face. I was like, okay,
Oh,
we're
yeah, of
actually like
course, right?
for this. I was
What-
like,
What's ba- what's bad for the Steelers is good for you. Look, if the
and
Steelers had done like if things had gone to script and the Steelers, pummeled them
Steelers should have
24-3
won.
or something like that, like that's what the script writers had for this, right? If that had happened, the Steelers would be 9-2, cruising towards the playoffs. They would have really put a
They'd have
stranglehold on
a chance
the
at the number one seed. They'd have a chance at the number one seed.
right.
Sure.
They really would have put a
Chance.
stranglehold on this division, and well,
Mhm.
that couldn't be right. It couldn't be as simple as all that. Not to mention, it would have been a little bit out of step for expectations, right? The Steelers have been good, but not great. I would argue not 9-2 great. Eight. I would
Oh,
argue that 8-3 is appropriate.
okay.
Um,
Good. Interesting.
yeah. So anyways, yeah. I am, I'm not upset. I'm not too vexed about that whole business. My assumption is that the Steelers will bounce back from this. I'm placing the Steelers. They've got a heavy schedule in front of them. I'm realistic about the Steelers. I'm putting them to finish probably about 11-6, which means that
Okay.
they'll basically split their remaining games. Because I think they've
Okay.
got KC on there. They've got Cleveland again, Cincinnati. They've
Yes.
got the Ravens again, and I forget who they play for their final game of the season. But like it's no, there's no patty cakes in there. The easy part of the
Oh yeah.
Steelers schedule was at the beginning of the season.
This is a
So
tough run. They got Bengals, Browns, Eagles, Ravens, Chiefs, and Bengals again. Bengals are a tough out, man. You know what I
yeah,
mean? They're
well
not a joke. They will take you to
and
the end.
the Eagles are the other team I couldn't put my finger on. I knew there were two NFC matchups, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So like tough schedule, and like prepare yourself for possibly even 10-7, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
like there's no cakewalks
I
in
doubt
there.
10-7. I like your first prediction, 11-6.
11-6, yeah.
So second seed, maybe third seed, you're gonna face. You know what'd be crazy? The Ravens versus Steelers in the playoffs, man. I can feel it coming because if you guys are
Oh,
like, we'll end up like a sixth. I think Ravens are gonna be a sixth seed,
oh
man.
yeah, yeah. No,
They brand too much, man.
it's gonna happen, right? Like,
Feel it.
I
I
mean,
feel
especially if you're like a fan of either team, you assume that they'll win their first round, right? You
it.
want them to go to the Super Bowl, right? It's got to
Yes,
be a game
sir.
in there somewhere where the Ravens and Steelers go against each other, right? So,
Yes, sir. I will say this, man. We got to give credit, and this will go into our overtime. So this is a little preview for y'all. Mike Tomlin, man, I'm telling you, I said earlier this season in our mid-season review that Kevin O'Connell should be coach of the year. I went the other way, dog. I went to the dark side. I think Tomlin is clearly the coach of the year. What he's been able to do with this Steelers team, man, project coming into the season, bro. Nobody saw this, man. I'm being real. I'll say to the outsider,
yeah.
maybe Steeler Nation was on this earlier than me. Nobody saw, in my mind, I did not see the Steelers at this point in the season being 8-3, very, very good position in the playoff hunt, and potentially, challenging the Chiefs because we've seen the Chiefs. The Chiefs are overhyped, man, and we might talk about that a little bit later. But the
Mm.
way Tomlin is coaching and putting his team in position, I am thoroughly impressed. Let's talk about that for a quick second before we shift over to teams that we're not so impressed by. What do you think of coach of the year, Mike Tomlin? I'm saying it right now. You know what I mean?
Well, of course, the bias will be against Tomlin just because he's been there for so long, right? Who's heard of a guy in his 15th year of tenure, being coach of the year, right? I mean,
I don't know.
but
It's
the
a little old.
reality is that yeah, he's certainly turned the ship around compared to because whenever you look at the Steelers, you kind of have to look at them not one year versus another year, but almost like in 5-year blocks and chunks because there's such continuity at the coaching position, ownership, management. There's so much continuity in the Steelers organization. You have to almost measure it in long waves rather than short. There's going to be some ups and downs along the way. But yeah, by any measure, Tomlin is off to his best start probably since 2008, 9, 10, and that time. And certainly the best start since Ben Roethlisberger has retired. More than that, he's stick-handled an interesting coaching situation. He's
Mhm.
managed the talent that Omar Khan has given him very effectively. At the same time, as a longtime Steelers fan, I really respect the feeling that he gives me as a fan in the sense that for the first time in quite a while, I feel like the Steelers can win any game that they're in. And it's
Yeah.
been and there's been some exciting plays to back that up. The Mike Williams one comes to mind, but there's been others, even during the Justin Fields starts and whatnot. So,
Mhm.
and of course, the defense is working on plus levels. And whenever I just have my fingers crossed for a Steelers play that I feel needs to happen, like they seem to pull it off. And that's the type of thing that I used to remember that a lot in the 2000s and early 2010s and whatnot. The Steelers are classic for the 3rd and 8 conversion. And they just, oh my God, are they going to do it? Well, they have to do it because if they don't do it, they're fucked, right? And they do it, right? Just I've seen it happen so many times. And so, yeah, so despite all of that, I kind of feel like Tomlin's, this might be his best coaching job yet, because this is entirely all his players by this point, obviously, right? I mean, Khan gives them to him, but you know what I mean? Like, no one can make any arguments that Bill Cowher's guys still populate the roster and all that type of stuff. And he has taken this Steelers team to heights we haven't seen in quite a while. So I'm all in on supporting Tomlin for Coach of the Year. There have been some other candidates you've heard me discuss. Everybody knows I like Dan Quinn as well. But I think, given the context, that Mike Tomlin has managed extraordinarily well.
And think about it like this: he's never won Coach of the Year, which shocked me. I'm like, what? He's never won Coach of the Year, and I'm like, what? That's crazy. But I know somebody who ain't winning Coach of the Year is Brian Daboll, because he just dropped. He literally dropped his QB, who should have been potentially benched 2 years ago, Daniel Jones. My quick take on this: why have they waited this long? It's crazy to see when I was growing up, man, looking at the Giants team with Eli Manning, Michael Strahan, loved that team as an outside viewer, just a fan of football. To see what they've become is so sad to watch. What do you think of this whole Daniel Jones situation and the
Well,
New York disaster?
do you really believe he's not the best quarterback in New York?
It sounds crazy, but he might be. He might be better
Yeah,
than
no, absolutely he is. I did a deep dive on the numbers,
Oh my
and
gosh, that's crazy.
here's me jumping ahead to stay in place and all that type of thing. Like, I shouldn't get into Tommy Cutlets quite yet, but Tommy DeVito, if you compare his numbers, if you go granular on his numbers in that 9-game stretch that he played last year, versus anybody else on that team that played last year, like, DeVito is arguably the best quarterback they had last year. And if you compare that 9-game stretch where he played last year to what Daniel Jones has done this year, again, the granular numbers are very much the same, meaning that his yards per completion, for example, wins, definitely, right? People forget that DeVito was a winning quarterback last year. The interceptions versus touchdowns, right? In those 9 games last year, I think DeVito was 8-3, right? 8 touchdowns versus 3 interceptions. So DeVito wasn't terrible. But if you compare his numbers to Daniel Jones, they're almost identical, except they're doubled in volume, right? So Daniel Jones had twice as many pass yards. Daniel Jones, like, on a per capita basis, twice as many pass yards, twice as many touchdowns, blah, blah, blah. So that's simply because Daniel Jones apparently was trusted with more of the playbook. They ran more passing plays with Daniel Jones over Tommy DeVito. So that there's a wrinkle to those numbers. But nevertheless, people who are, like, during Bimageddon this week, spoiler alert, people who are desperate for a quarterback or something like that with a good matchup, Tommy DeVito actually has a very good matchup against Tampa Bay today. As long as he doesn't throw a bunch of interceptions or fumble, I bet you that there won't be a discernible difference between Daniel Jones and Tommy Cutlets, right? So what does this all boil down to? If there's not, like, a dramatic argument to be made in favor of his backup, why on earth are they doing this in week 12 of the season, right? Well, of course, this is a memo coming down from the accounting office, right? What has happened to Daniel Jones is that he's been Russell Wilson. The exact same scenario happened to Russell Wilson last year. And it's a quirk in the accounting, right? As of a certain date in late November, apparently, there's an injury guarantee in your contract, in the fine print of your contract. Anyhow you get injured between now and the time that free agency, I guess it is, opens, or the trading window opens in the spring, in March, anyhow you get injured between now and that time, your contract is guaranteed to a certain level. In this particular level, it was $27 million dollars where Jones is concerned. And in Russell Wilson's case, I think it was around 40 million or 34 million, some number like this,
Yes.
was absolutely guaranteed if he was on the roster and got injured. So what's the obvious thing to do, right? You don't want an injury, right? So
That's why they had him
that's so
playing safety in practice squad.
right.
They
Okay.
wanted him fourth string. Yeah.
Okay, so that's what you end up doing. So with Russell Wilson, they handled it very ham-handedly, right? They just sat him. They just sat him and just said, "Okay, we've seen enough of Russell Wilson for the year," which was very difficult to explain when he had like 24 TDs and like only 8 interceptions last year, or whatever. At that point in the season last year, he had over 3,000 yards. Like people were really scratching their heads trying to figure out just how much Sean Payton hated Russell Wilson that they would sit him down with those type of numbers, right? Why he
Mm,
would little boy him the way he did. But the reality is that the accounting memo said very clearly, don't play him anymore, right? So they
yeah.
sat him. So the Giants, to their credit, are doing the same thing, but at least they're giving Daniel Jones the opportunity to seek employment elsewhere going down the stretch, right? They're allowing him to retain his dignity, but the exact same accounting move is occurring here. Like they're really revealing their hand that they have no interest in Daniel Jones coming back next year,
Mm,
which,
mm,
kind of surprises me. Because
mm.
I don't think that the Giants are some type of spectacular team with a new quarterback. Like I don't think they do, and I think that Jones has shown flashes of competence at different times this year, certainly in line with the rest of the Giants prospects. So yeah, but
Yeah.
nevertheless, it's obvious that the Giants are on the clock and ready to draft a quarterback in the first round next year.
I will say that I slightly disagree with you, brother. I think Daniel Jones was not good, man. He was not good in terms of, yes, he had flashes, but after 6 years, brother, I don't, and how much money they were giving him. I understand that we should let young
Nobody
quarterbacks
told them to
see
re-sign him last year. Like you said, after six
exactly.
years,
6 years, that's a big enough. That's more than enough sample size to
right?
say, brother, get out of here. Good night.
I,
Bye bye. And the irony of this whole situation is the guy that they let go in free agency, Saquon Barkley, is having a borderline MVP season on the outer edges. And they decided to keep a quarterback who was middle at best. And like you said, has comparable stats to his backup. So my thing is, I
yeah.
think they shouldn't have even came in the season with Daniel Jones. And I think not only the finances, but this might be a move by Dayball in order to keep his job because his credibility is on the line as well. Has a hot seat, and I'm gonna say a hot take right now. I think the Jets are gonna do the same with Aaron, man. I think they're going to. There's been rumors. I think Aaron's gonna be cut mid-season before the season ends if they either lose this game or the game after. Again, going back to what you said, the finances. They
Yeah.
owe him a lot of money, and Aaron has expressed interest that he wants to play next year. But like you said, the money, the contract thing, I think the Jets are about done with Mr. Discount double check. When's the last time you saw that on?
Well, did you hear some of the conversations this week? Apparently, the owner hauled everybody's ass on the carpet like after week 4.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
he genuinely wanted to know, why was this not working, right? You guys asked for all these things, I put them in place, now they're not working. Why? Right? Which just goes to show you just how little of a football mind exists in the front office.
Oh,
Woody just this franchise clearly is just one of his businesses. It's a hobby. The guy clearly doesn't
yes.
understand how football works, right? And I find all of this stuff amusing, right? Back to the Daniel Jones scenario, when you're talking, like, they
Right.
re-signed him for big money,
Yes.
right? How much? 40 million a year or something like that. And then
Yes.
the very next year, you fire him. Like, why did you re-sign him if his position was so tenuous in the first place? If you had that many questions, if you were willing if we were willing to sacrifice the last 6 games of the year to Tommy Cutlets, why not just sacrifice the whole year, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
redraft a first rounder quarterback in 2026. Right. So like I'm mystified by moves like this where you re-sign the guy. Just like I'm mystified by people who think that James Brooks in North Carolina is suddenly going to take over the backfield now that he's come in. They just finished signing Chuba Hubbard and extending his contract. They made him the big top dog as far as
Yeah.
his paycheck is concerned. Like, I don't understand the thinking with some people, right? Money means something, and it should have meant
Yes.
something to Daniel Jones, right? It should have meant something to the New York head office. Why on earth would you resign him for this amount of money if his job was this insecure? So, yeah, to me, this whole thing with Jones is crazy, but like, I mean, wouldn't he look good in San Francisco right now with Purdy down on injury, right? Like, I bet you any
Yeah,
money.
of course.
I bet you
Yeah.
any money he'd look like a completely different quarterback.
This is the thing about football that's so interesting, man. Football is definitely about, of course, it's about, the players. That's not when, come on, we know that. But the system and the front office is so important
It's
to the
all
game of
about
football,
opportunity
man.
with opportunity
Oh,
with an opportunity with competence. Like
oh
that's what
yeah,
you
of
want.
course. Of course. And you know what? It's more time often than not that the front office, the coaching, all these people mess it up before we get to the quarterback. And I'll say this, despite how Daniel Jones has played, do you think he'd be great on the Niners? He'd be fantastic in that system. Do you think he'd
Well,
be great in Minnesota? He'd be great in that system.
yeah,
But the overall franchise and the organization has sabotaged him in a manner that
right.
makes him not be able to play. But guess who ain't doing that? The Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos put this guy in position for him to whoop on the Falcons 38 to
Right.
6, brother. Bo Nix had an inspirational game, man. You look at the stats
Hmm.
in front of your screen. 307, 4 touchdowns. If you had Cortland Sutton on your fantasy, he gave you a little chunk. You had a very great performance actually by the rookie. 300 yards, like I said. He did some work, not as much rushing as he usually does because he's dual threat. Yes, Bo Nix is a dual threat guy. This is an organization that now is fully aligned. The coach is aligned, the GM, the quarterback, the offense is rolling. The Denver, I'm gonna say this. This is a prediction. They might shock some people in the play. They might get a one win in the playoff, but I'm telling you right now, is Bo Nix challenging Jaden Daniels for that Rookie of the Year conversation? Unc, what do you think? Or are we getting
Well,
too hype? Am I getting too hype about it? What do you think?
no, not at all.
Yeah.
No, not at all. In fact, yeah, I was going to say now you have a genuine race for Rookie of the Year right now, where before it was kind of a runaway thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bo Nix has been. I mean, we were making jokes the first 2 or 3 weeks,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Just because Denver's been such a hot mess at quarterback for 10 years, right? Basically since Peyton Manning retired.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Now we also said that perhaps this might be the end of it because there is a credible coach in place with an established system. We all said like, where's his Drew Brees? If he can just find his own Drew Brees, he'll be fine. This Bo Nix fella, he's got some experience. He played over 60 games in college. Fingers crossed, right? Maybe this could work. And now, in the first month of the season, it didn't really look like that. In his first 3 games, the guy threw 4 picks, 0 touchdowns, and it looked like the beat goes on in Denver, right? But let me tell you, like he had as many touchdowns in his last game as he had picks in his first 3 games. And he had 4 more touchdowns in that game in which he scored 4 touchdowns than he had in those opening 3 games. In other words, he had 0 touchdowns his first 3 games.
Yeah.
Compare that to what he's been doing recently, and there really is no comparison. Bo Nix is on a whole other trajectory right now
Mhm.
because that whole franchise, starting with the defense especially, is doing
Yeah.
much better. So as they're competitive, the offense has done at least the bare minimum. And now we're getting up to that point of the season where rookies aren't really rookies anymore, right? Hard to really call Bo Nix a rookie anymore. It just doesn't really add up. But let me give you his numbers, right? He's throwing at a 65% completion rate. Um,
Right.
he's had he had two interceptions. What was it? He's had six interceptions all year. But remember, I told you he had four interceptions in his first three games. So he's had
Yeah.
only two interceptions in his last 8 games. Right. So
Right.
that's very remarkable. That's a very telling stat. He's had an almost identical story arc and narrative as Jaden Daniels. Like they're both coming on struggling franchises that drafted
Yeah.
new quarterbacks after repeated failures at the position previously. So they both have a very similar story to tell, both with new coaching setups in there. Now, ultimately, Bo Nix has more touchdowns than Jaden Daniels, but that's the only real category or measuring metric in which he beats Jaden Daniels for numbers. Jaden's actually a more efficient quarterback. He's got more
Yeah.
rushing yards than Bo Nix does.
Mhm.
Bo Nix has just under 300 yards rushing. That's impressive, right? It's about 30 yards a game. But he got 75 and 61 respectively in 2 games in the middle of the season.
Yeah.
So there have been several games where he hasn't really run at all. He hasn't needed to, right? So he
Mhm.
only runs when he needs to. And when he needs to run, he can. So he doesn't look
Right.
quite as impressive on the overall numbers as does Jaden Daniels. But both
Mhm.
quarterbacks are winning. Both quarterbacks are leading their teams as rookies to,
Right.
it looks like, the playoffs, possibly, right? So yeah,
Absolutely.
there's a lot of football still to be played. You can't really make a determination that either Bo Nix or Jaden Daniels is the runaway candidate for Rookie of the Year. And in fact, we now have at least two people in this race, right? Because we know
Yeah.
it's probably going to go to a rookie quarterback. Where a rookie quarterback excels, all other rookie performances are ignored, apparently, right?
That's true. Yeah. My
So
my
yeah, but at least we've got a good little conversation piece from now to the end of the season. Both Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix are going to be a toss up. It looks like because they are right now a toss up for Rookie of the Year.
It's definitely very interesting, man. As we get into the mix, the last 4 weeks of the season, a lot of divisional matchups. So we're gonna see Bo Nix
Mm-hmm.
potentially face, the Chargers, potentially face KC. We're going to see Jaden face the Eagles again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Get well, Dallas doesn't even count. That's not a competition. But the Eagles, you know what I mean? We're gonna see these rookies perform in the highest pressure situations with the best teams, and I'm excited to see it. I was impressed by Bo Nix. I started him in my other fantasy league, gave me a lot of points. I was very, very happy with the
Yeah.
performance versus
Well,
the Falcons. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah. No, well,
Mhm.
your advice a couple 3 weeks ago to pick up Bo Nix was actually good advice, and I
Mhm.
should have taken it. But I've been reasonably good at quarterback, but I've been trying to shore it up, right? Look, going through to the rest of the season because I was not sure of the rest of Gino's schedule, and of course, I knew that Kirk O'Chains had a shelf life. I knew that wasn't going to last forever. You can't play Tampa Bay every game, right? So yeah,
Right.
I would have been very happy to pick up Bo Nix. But because he's gone on, he's put up a lot of points. He's shown a lot of efficiency. And the other thing to say about Jaden Daniels, you'll notice there's been a drop off in his performance since he got
A little
that
bit.
rib injury, right? Rib injuries, boy, they hang around and hang around. They're painful and they
Yeah.
don't heal really quickly. It's kind of like what you call a niggling injury. It just gets in there, right? It stays there, it doesn't go anywhere.
Right.
We've seen a real drop off, not a real drop off, but a drop off in performance from Jaden Daniels since then. So how he continues to improve and recover from that injury will also be part of the story.
Absolutely, man. We'll quickly touch on two topics for a quick second, namely the absolute dominance. And Unc, you called this so early. The Detroit Lions are absolutely whooping on teams, embarrassing them, making people go home and cry to their mommy. 9-1, 50, a 50 burger, brother. And it's not like this is new to them. They borderline put up 45 plus 3 times this season.
Yeah, yeah.
What
I was
is
gonna
going on
say,
with Jared Goff, bro? Jared Goff will throw you like 5 picks and then do this. Talk to
dude,
him.
this is their second 52-point game of the year.
Crazy. Yep.
Two, two 52-point games, and they've also got a 47, I think, and a 42-point game also.
Wow.
Right. So yeah, no, Detroit's dominance. They're scoring 34 points a game, less than 18 points a game scored against. They got 41 touchdowns. They've allowed 17 touchdowns in 10 games, right? Less than 2 touchdowns a game.
Wow.
In almost every single team metric used by ESPN, the Detroit Lions dominate. There's just no getting around it. They haven't lost since week 2. And
Wow.
the first 2 weeks of the season were kind of awkward, right? They lost one game, then they won another against the Rams in overtime in opening week, right? So it took them a couple of weeks to get their footing. But ever since then, they've been a blitzkrieg, for heaven's sakes. Um, yeah, and they're also very diverse and dynamic in their talent, right?
Yeah.
Witness the Sam Laporta owners in fantasy, people who thought he was going to be a dominant receiver, but they're between Amon St. Jameson,
Yes.
and Laporta. Plus, there's 2 or 3 other C-level receivers that have seen action in there. Both of
Mm-hmm.
their running backs are weekly in the top 12. Like not
Yes, sir.
just one of them, but both of them are
Right.
weekly top 10, top 12 plays in fantasy. So
Mm.
it's a really interesting offense. They're actually a little bit imbalanced towards the run. They're really old school that way.
Mm.
They've run 323 times for 1,500 for 152 yards a game in rushing offense. They pass 206 times, or they passed 282 times. So it's like a kind of like a 60-40, 55-45 split running versus a passing. But like that's good work if you can get it, right? I mean, like a lot of people would like to run more often than they pass because it's less risky, right? But a lot of teams, you need to score. So you're passing, right? No, not Detroit. Detroit gets away with it. They've got about a 73% completion rate, so they're very efficient, and 9.2 yards per pass, right? So they're getting a first down
Wow.
almost every time they pass, right? So yeah, that's pretty impressive stuff. So altogether, it's about 410 yards a game in
Wow.
offense. Yeah, they allow about 344. So however you want to measure it, Detroit dominates in almost every category you can think of. So yeah, it's. I've heard the argument made that people hate parity, that they like to have at least one team who can just open up a can of whoop ass every weekend, like just because you want to
Right.
see it sometimes, right? You
Oh,
want to see
yes.
how the game is played sometimes at its highest level. And if you're a
Oh,
fan of
yeah.
that type of football, Detroit's your team this year, right? Like, sure,
Yes.
people want to make note of that Jared Goff 5 interception game. I mean, the most notable thing about it is that they actually won the game, right?
They
But they've
won
only
the
had
game. What?
Goff's only had 9 interceptions on the year. So if you had
Wow.
5 in one game, that means that in 9 games you had only 4, right? Like that's pretty impressive. So game
Yeah.
manager Jared Goff has been highly successful with Detroit this year, and it's interesting for a team that has been so dominant. Like
Mhm.
their quarterback's nobody special.
Yeah, you know what is special, like you said, great breakdown was their running game. Their running game is so elite. And you look at it,
Oh,
man, I don't know
dude.
what it is, but the comeback of the running back is so massive right now. Every great team, Eagles, every great team, Ravens, every great team, Detroit, every great team, I would even say the Chiefs, the running attack is major. And talking about the Chiefs, they lost. They lost.
Finally, right?
Shout out
Finally.
Josh Allen, MVP candidate. Unc called it early. He's really, some people are saying he's a
Well,
winner.
well,
Fantastic.
remember,
Fantastic.
I mean, I called it, but I didn't call it. I made the
Mm,
case for Buffalo. I made a clear case for Buffalo to cover that point spread easily and win that game. But what I said at the end was until the Chiefs show me that, that they're capable of losing, that this isn't some magical stardust season, right?
mm.
That I had to go with them. But I made the case for Buffalo. Absolutely.
You
You're
made the
right. I
argument.
was
I
on that,
remember
right?
you made exactly the argument that actually happened. Actually, that's what happened.
My metric said that Buffalo won, but was supposed to win by 9.7 points. They won by 10.
There you go. And
So,
you know what?
but
It was earned. It was earned. The
like,
first time the Chiefs allowed 30 points in, I think 2025, some crazy stats, and it was against the Buffalo Bills, obviously by Josh Allen. I wanted to sprinkle on that before we get to the other things. Go ahead.
yeah, well, I mean that game was great to see, right? Because the spell has been broken. So we no longer have that hanging over our heads, the undefeated Chiefs and all that crap. Now we can focus on the actual details of the game, right? Like if you had asked me to pick that game this week, I'd have been Buffalo all the way. It's a lock. Take the over, right? Which is exactly what happened. I went 9-5 last week. I went 9-5 last
Oh,
week on my games,
okay.
or 9-4,
Wow.
whatever. I had 9 wins. I had 9 covers last week, right? I would have had double digits if I'd stuck to my system. But the Chiefs, that's what the Chiefs being undefeated does to you, right?
Oh yeah.
It skews your thinking. So I'm glad that mess is done.
I'm telling you right now, man, the Chiefs got away with a lot of games they should have lost. A lot. Oh, they should be. I'm not even lying. They should be like probably 7-4. I'm not even BSing. If we remove the ref,
Yeah.
if we remove that pump block, I mean the field goal block, if we remove a
Yep.
lot of questionable calls, this is a 7-4 team. And I'm telling you right now, the Buffalo Bills, top team, Steelers. I'm gonna say that hurts me to say, but the Buffalo Bills and Steelers are a better football team than the Chiefs. It's just the Chiefs find miraculous way to win, and we want to win this week with our lines and spreads, not our starts and sits, our lines and spreads. That's what
Right
we
on,
want to
man.
win. We want to win like the Chiefs this upcoming week, man. Week 12 football. Do you want me to pick, or do you have some things you have circled
Well,
up that we should
let
check out?
me let me point out a couple that I have, and then I'll answer any questions you've got.
Mhm.
As I was mentioning earlier, I think there's a bit of a disparity in the Tampa Bay at New York Giants game.
Okay.
My metrics on this, my formula for point spreads and whatnot says that you should trust any Tampa Bay spread up to about 7.5 points. Right, so
Okay.
anything around 6.5, 7.5 points seems appropriate. What are
Mhm.
they at right now? Because the last time earlier on in the week, I had Tampa Bay as favored by only 5. They're at 6.5 now.
There's 6.5 over under 40 and 40 and a half,
Yeah.
45.
So I think that makes it just that much easier. I mean, it's not easier for the Giants to cover, but it gives them a bit of a larger line for people who want to bet on the Giants. There's more space for them to cover, and I think that's what's going to happen today. I think that the Buccaneers allow a
Mm-hmm.
lot of points on the ground, and the Giants have a good running attack. They also allow a lot of points in the air, and like I said, there's not going to be that much of a drop off with Tommy Cutlets in there. So, like, I believe that the Giants are capable of scoring today. I doubt they
Mm-hmm.
score more than 21, 22 points, but they
Okay.
also have a reasonable defense that I don't believe that the score gets out of control by the Bucs on the road. The
Mm.
weather's fairly decent in New York, so that's not going to really be a factor. But our point spread, it's down, or our over under is down to, it's gone even further down. Huh? It's down to 40 and a
Yeah,
half.
40 and a half, man. The defense of the Giants, I believe, has to be
And
factored
it
in. They
started
have a
at,
great defense in New York. Yeah.
yeah, it's reasonable. Yeah, it's reasonable. And it started at 40 and a half. Okay, I'm going to say take the over on that and take the
Okay.
Giants to cover the points.
Ooh, okay, okay. I would say something controversial. I'd say take the under. I think this won't be high scoring, but I will probably take Giants with the points, meaning that the Giants with Tommy Cutlass might surprise some people, man. I wouldn't be surprised by that.
Well, think about what 40 points is, right? I mean, that's basically a 20-20
Yeah.
game. Yeah. So yeah, to me, I'm like I just see Tampa Bay scoring enough points. Like I see it more as like 27-24. But we'll see, right? We'll see.
We'll
You're right.
definitely
Like
see. We'll
games
definitely
on the East Coast in New York City late in the season are notoriously low scoring affairs. So you might be right. Um, any other disparities I see on that? The
see.
Texans at home versus Tennessee. Tennessee, who's 1-9 against the spread. My number on this says that the point spread for the Texans could go as high as 11 points. So,
Okay.
yeah. Because what are we at now? 8? I'd say
It's at 8,
Texans.
man. Hmm.
Texans by 8, I think, is a comfortable number right there. So I would take that. Like I say, Tennessee's 1-9 against the spread. Texans are not fantastic, but at least they're even, right? 5-1 against the spread. Now the over/under is at 40.5.
Hmm.
Yeah, and that's 40.5, huh?
I would
So and
expect
now it's
more.
dropped. It
More.
is dropped from 46.5. Yeah, 40 again. I would say take the over on that. Just
I think you
let's hear it for Joe Mixon. Hopefully Joe Mixon does his part on the ground and gives us at least a 2-touchdown head start on the over under.
and you know what? You know what? Nico Collins is back, so I think he's getting warmed up. It's gonna be hard because Tennessee has obviously Snead,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
who's a shutdown corner. But I wouldn't be surprised if Tank Dell or somebody on the back end comes through and puts up a lot of
Well,
points for
and
Tennessee. I'll take the
I think
over.
you make a good point about Nico Collins. Nico Collins sort of had a disappointing return from injury,
Yeah,
so it
absolutely.
wouldn't surprise me if they look to throw him out there a little bit more and try to sort of make up for that. You know how it goes in the NFL and fantasy. There tends to be this zigzag bounce back type of dynamic that seems to function within that universe. The only other one I've got sort of circled here is Green Bay and the 49ers looks like that's really active, Like I think
Yeah, yeah. Let me look
Green
at
Bay started out as a 1-point favorite earlier on in the week, and what are they up to now? Was it 6 points?
6 points, man. They're giving them 6, and the over under is 44.5, 45, 44 and a half, meaning that they're thinking there's going to be a little bit of a shootout, meaning, or maybe a crushing. I don't know,
Well,
maybe
I
which.
think
I
what they're
don't know.
saying is that Green Bay is,
Yeah.
I guess, since they announced that Purdy was injured, I think that's when the
Mm,
point spread took
30 injured.
off, right? Because it was
Yeah.
as of Tuesday morning, the point spread was 2.5 points. And two
Oh,
and a half points at home for Green Bay against a San Francisco team that has underperformed most of the season. I would go with that. I'd go with that all day long. But
mm,
my numbers say that Green Bay should only be favored by at the most 1 point. But I,
okay.
I say take the 49ers in this, man. Take the 49ers to cover
Oh,
6 points because Green Bay has shown has shown a tendency, I should say, to allow some points on defense. And as for the over/under 48 points, what is it at now?
it's 44.5, so less points.
Okay, so it's dropped considerably. Actually, that number makes a lot of sense. I would say take the over on that just barely. I'd say 45 points is about right for this. The two teams combined for 50 ordinarily, but you got to take the absence of Purdy into account.
That's gonna be huge, man. Purdy is out. That makes the Niners team so disappointing, man. The Cardinals are actually leading that division. Who would have
Yeah,
thought in their right
San
mind?
Francisco is not going to win that division.
That's I know. It's very clear. But guess what? It's very interesting. My game that I think I want to circle down that might be a little bit surprising is this Eagles versus Rams game. How are you looking at it, man? They got Eagles by 3 points. Over
Yep.
under is 48 and a half. I'm telling you, man, the Bengals and the Rams are two teams that can win every single game every week. And they can also lose every game every single
They're
week. They are,
maddening.
they are, they are such a sink or swim type of
They're
team.
maddening. Like
Oh my God.
Matt Stafford denies all dictates of both fantasy and real football in the modern era. Right? He's such a throwback. You get no rushing yards out of that guy whatsoever. He's a statue back there. But he's
Yeah.
just a good quarterback. He plays very well. and he's got two great receivers functioning for him at the moment, right? A lot of people are upset that a lot of Kyron Williams owners are upset that all of a sudden his productivity's dropped off, but Nakua and Cup are the game that's in town right now, and that is the way Los Angeles is going to win games. So they're doing a lot of that. But against Philly, right? Again, this is another game that's featuring strength against strength, right? Philly's defense, in particular the secondary, has been the key to their turnaround and their success since about week 3 or 4, since their bye week especially. That has been the key to Philly's success, has been their defense, in particular the secondary. Now, my numbers tell me that Philly should be favored by anything up to 10 points, right? So with a 3-point spread, Philly's now favored on the road by 3 points.
Yes.
And the Rams started out as a half-point favorite at home, believe it or not. So the money's clearly swinging to Philadelphia, and according to my numbers, for good reason. So to me, that seems like an easy bet. Take Philly on the road. And as for the over-under, that's a close one. What are they showing now? 48.5?
48.5. Yes, sir.
It started out as 50. It started out as 47, and it went as high as 50.5 on Tuesday morning. And my points say that that these two teams add up to just over 47 points per game. So 48.5. I say take the under on that. Take the under on that.
Okay.
Yeah, man. 24-22. I see it coming.
Nice.
No. 20 no, more like 25-21 or something like that. So I think Philly, like my numbers tell me that Philly should win this thing by 10 points. They're also 6-4 against the spread, whereas the LA Rams are 4-6. And Philly is 6-4 against the spread. The Rams are 4-6 against the spread. So give me Philly on the road with what should be an easy number for them to cover.
I agree with both points, man. I would take the under because I expect a defensive game. You're going to see a lot of rushing. The Philly secondary is absolutely amazing. Will they clamp down Puka Nacua and Cooper Cup playing at their
That's the
apex
challenge,
now?
right?
That's the challenge. My bet is that they'll stain some of them, but I think Kyron Williams is going to have a fantastic game. So it's going to be a tight, defensive, low-scoring game. But I think it's going to be entertaining. I'm excited to watch that game. I'll say it's
right on.
What are the can we touch on one more game? I don't know.
Sure.
Touch on one more game, brother. Let's go back to the NFC West.
Yep.
Cards versus Seattle. Seattle's been up and down this season. Cards have been actually quiet as kept on a little winning streak, if I'm not mistaken. You know what I mean? They got the Cards -1, you know what I mean? Basically, that's close as hell. Basically a pick 'em and 46.5 points versus the Seattle Seahawks. What are you looking at, brother?
Wow, this is a really interesting match. My immediate answer on this is that I believe that the Cardinals are going to go into Seattle today and win. I think that's going to be the ultimate result. Like the home team is usually favored by 2 to 3 points, as we've discussed at length on this program. And so for the Cardinals to be a 1-point favorite seems to be sort of a stimulus for Seattle money to come in, right? Seattle money saying, oh, no, the boys are going to win at home, right? So it actually implies a 1.5 to 2 point spread in favor of Seattle. But I don't buy that, man. The eye test just tells me that the Cardinals are playing much better football right now than the Seahawks. The Seahawks have got some people healthy again. They've got Metcalf back. They've got JSN back. They've got their defense they've righted the ship a little bit on defense. They're not allowing all the points that they were earlier on in the season.
Yeah.
So, and Geno Smith has been incredibly steady at quarterback. Nevertheless, I have seen the Cardinals show an ability to put up 40-plus points when they get when the circumstances are correct. And I haven't really seen that out of Seattle. Seattle's they sort of have a ceiling of about 28 points, 25 points a game when they're really good. When they're really bad, it's like worse than that. But my numbers, my points for, points against, all that type of stuff, that little algorithm that I use when I'm doing my picks, it tells me that that Arizona should be favored by 2.5 points. So any point spread up to 2.5 points, I would be comfortable with in Arizona's favor. They're also 7-3 against the point spread this season. So
Oh,
yeah, and Seattle is 3-6-1 against the spread.
okay.
So yeah, I see. I think that Arizona spread is appropriate, and
Okay.
I think that they'll cover it today. My guess is that they win by at least 3, if not a touchdown. The two teams combined for about 47 points a game. So what's that? 46.5 they got as an over-under.
Yeah, 46.5. So
I
you
say,
take over, right?
yeah, I say take the over on that game. Both teams are capable of putting up 24 points in a heartbeat.
Oh, absolutely, man. And if we talking about it, man, here's somebody that's kind of coming in, and this actually goes quickly into our little, what I mean, fantasy football starts and sits. As we prep for the playoffs, James Conner's getting on a little bit of a run now, man. He's been getting some touchdowns in recent games. The Arizona Cardinals are winning with their running game. Obviously, you're going to start Kyler. I'm telling you right now, Kyler could win you some matchups. He's
Yeah,
slowly rising as well. 4-game winning streak is not a joke for the Arizona Cardinals. I would start
that's right.
most offensive guys on Arizona.
Well, and yeah, between James
Mhm.
Conner, Kyler Murray, and now recently Marvin Harrison Jr. starting to come around a little bit,
Yeah,
right? And their defense, by the way, too. Their defense is
yeah,
we'll discuss that a little bit more when we're discussing fantasy starts and sits and whatnot. But the Cardinals have been actually kind of rewarding between Trey McBride and those others that I mentioned. Trey McBride, Kyler Murray, and James Conner. There's 3 guys right there that have been very reliable in fantasy recently.
yes,
So
sir.
yeah, and it's going to get better for them going down the stretch. So yeah, hold on to your Arizona players and look for some interesting things, I believe, to come out of that Arizona franchise as we go down the stretch of this NFL season.
Absolutely, absolutely. Before we fully leave the lines and spreads, any other games? For me, I'm pretty good. Obviously, you know me. I'm going to be watching my Ravens versus Chargers. They're hardball. Is there any last game you want to touch on? Something that
Well,
you really want to?
yeah, actually, that game is actually pretty
Oh,
interesting to
okay.
watch.
Let's look
Yeah,
at it.
yeah.
Let's
To
look
me,
at
that game is kind of like almost like a repeat of the Steelers game, right?
it.
You can believe that Jim Harbaugh is like studying that tape ferociously, right? With his big brother coming to town.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
I heard some fascinating Harbaugh stories during the week this week as people looked at that game coming up. But we don't really have time to get into all that. But there's some
Yeah.
some fascinating dynamics there. They brought in a couple of psychologists on this one segment to discuss what goes on between the Harbaughs.
What?
Yeah, I'm
Wow.
not even joking. Apparently, well, I guess we're going to do this. Apparently, there's one anecdote that says that Jim Harbaugh at some family barbecue at some point, this is when they were adults, like tried to shove his brother underwater, like tried to drown him, like low key tried to murder his brother. Anyways, so yeah, so we've got the Harbowl, as some people are calling it, right?
Oh,
So
hardball. Yep.
Baltimore is traveling to LA to play
Yeah.
at SoFi against the Chargers. The Chargers, who are 7-3 against the spread, versus Baltimore, who's 5-1 against the spread. Now, my numbers say that the Chargers should be favored by anything up to 1.5 points.
Oh,
The point spread is 3 for the Chargers. So on the road, like
I
I'm
think
gonna
it's
take
moved. It's
I'm gonna
moved to
take
2.5. By the
Baltimore.
way, it's
Pardon
moved to
me.
2.5. It's moved to
It's
two
up
and
to
a half.
2.5 now.
It's 2.5 for the Ravens. The point spread I should look into today,
Oh,
but
2.5 for the Ravens.
for the Ravens, brother, yeah. At
Oh,
least with
okay. No,
Vegas
no, no,
Insider,
no.
that's what
Pardon me.
they're
I
giving me right now.
I
Yeah,
no, I thought that. Okay, sorry. I was thinking that was okay. Sorry, I'm getting tied around here between what my numbers say who should be favored versus who is the
yeah.
favorite. My bad. Okay,
Well,
so the
well,
number's
the
gone
Vegas
down a little
Insider,
bit.
yeah, the insider Vegas Insider is showing 2.5 for the
Two and a
Ravens
half
and
versus the
50 and a
three
half.
points. versus the
Yup.
3 points they had earlier. Okay, right. And my
Mhm.
number is saying 1.7 in the Chargers' favor. So yeah, I'm taking the Chargers to cover that spread because my
Okay.
numbers say that the Chargers should be favored by a point and a half rather than the other way
Ooh.
around. Sorry, I got twisted on that. So yeah, there's my
Okay.
upset pick. It's the Chargers to cover the spread against
Ooh.
Baltimore. And if they cover that spread, it doesn't mean that they win, but my
Mhm.
guess is that the Ravens hang on to win,
Yeah.
and but it's going to be another game like that Cincinnati game.
Oh
Maybe
yes.
with not
Oh
quite as many points, but
yeah.
probably like 24-23 or 28-27, some kind of game like that.
Mhm.
Chargers cover the spread but lose. So
Mhm.
but also now is the over still like over 50 points? I've got it at started out at 47 and went to 51 points. What are you at now? 50 and a half?
50 and a half right now. Mhm.
Wow,
Mhm.
huh? Ugh. Take the
They
over.
expect it.
Take
Take
the
the over.
over.
I was gonna say that too. I was gonna say that too. What happened with the Steelers game, man? I do not see my Ravens defense being that great again.
It
And what
won't
is happening
it
with
won't happen
Lad
2 weeks in a
McConkey?
row.
It won't happen 2 weeks. What's happening with Lad McConkey and Justin Herbert is a very fun football connection to watch. They know they're in sync, man. They simpatico. I would not
Yeah.
be surprised again if a little fantasy starts and says, "You better start Lad McConkey. You better start him right now." You know what I mean?
Oh, I'm starting Lad McConkey, trust me.
Yeah, you better, brother.
In
Yeah, I mean,
fact,
but
in
it's
fact, let me
I
just
like I
put that
say, go ahead.
let me just put that out there as the caveat for the week, right? The same way that we said during when Cincinnati was playing Baltimore, that just whatever Cincinnati and Baltimore skill players you have, just put them out
Started,
there. Same
put
thing
him out
goes.
there.
Same thing goes for that Baltimore Chargers game. Whatever skill players you have, just like put them out there. I have a feeling that game is going to be lit.
Oh,
Um,
it's gonna be
but
fun, bro. It's gonna be fun.
but this mercifully is the last of the big bye weeks. Yeah, I think this might even be the last of the bye weeks, but it's a heavy one, right? People are calling it Bye-mageddon. But the Falcons, Jags, Bengals, Bills, and Jets are all on bye this week.
Oh my
Yeah, pardon me, and the Saints. And the Saints.
wow.
So any of the fantasy players you have on those teams, right? So we're talking about Bijan, Mooney, London. For the
Yeah.
Saints, we're talking about Kamara, MVS, Carr, Hill. For the Bengals, we're talking about Burrow, Chase Brown, T. Higgins. For the Jags, I don't know, man. I don't know what fantasy players you start for the Jags. For the Jets, you got Garrett Wilson, Bryce Allen, and Devontae Adams.
Yeah.
All of these guys are out of the mix for this week. So if you have them as prominent starters on your teams, you need to find replacements. Hopefully, you've already put a lot of work and effort into that by now, right?
Oh, oh my God. Don't get me started. Bijan's gone through,
Right?
so I have to adjust.
It's
It's sorry.
I've seen some teams that are just gutted this week. It's insane.
Oh yeah.
Um, so obviously you're looking to fill gaps on these things, right? The bad news is that on running back, like there's hardly anybody out there. People have picked up on the trend that running backs are producing this year. There hasn't been a lot of injuries at the position, surprisingly. So there hasn't
No,
been
it's
a
very
lot of
healthy.
there
No.
haven't been a lot of upstarts getting opportunities at the position. So they're
Yeah.
fairly pretty well set, right? So, but
Mm,
just for a couple of names that are out there, if you really need a moonshot or you need some help filling those gaps, right?
mm,
Estime and Javonte Williams are available in a lot of leagues, but Denver's
yeah.
been maddening, man. It's like some people have been accusing Peyton of like trolling fantasy by like the way he went out there and said that, Audric Estime is looking for a big uptick in targets and running opportunities and whatnot. All of fantasy followed Sean Payton around on that one,
Yeah.
only to get burned by Javonte Williams getting the majority of the carries that game, right? So that's frustrating. Vegas is the only place with a real opening up at running back this week, right? And has with Amir Abdullah is only owned in 17% of leagues, so it looks like he's gonna get the majority of carries there. Is that good news or
Okay.
bad? Yes. I don't really know. Amir
Right.
Abdullah, when given opportunity, has not been prolific. Neither of the running backs, Zamir White or Madison, have been prolific. So I don't see where any big change is going to occur with Amir Abdullah. But if you need to make
Right.
a change, you need to plug a gap. he's available in in over 85% of leagues.
Right.
The other one is Roshan Johnson. Is only about 28% owned in Chicago. Tough matchup, but he has been getting some of the end zone looks.
Mhm.
So yeah, and some of the red zone carries as well. So he doesn't get a ton of carries, but the ones he gets matter. So that's what you're looking for. Now, so the other ones, and he also did have like 10 carries last week. So we are seeing a bit of a shift that way. So not a
Okay.
lot of talent available at running back if you're looking to fill gaps. So good luck with that, fantasy managers. At wide
Right.
receiver, Romeo Dobbs is available in about 50% of leagues. He also has a very
Right.
kind-looking schedule going down the stretch for the fantasy playoffs, which is something that fantasy managers should be looking at right now, right? What are the
Yeah.
matchups going to look like going down the stretch, right? Is it all green lights or is it a whole bunch of impossible red light matchups, right?
Yeah.
Um, Roma Dunze seems to be taking over as the number one wide receiver in Chicago for whatever that's worth. And he's
Yeah.
owned in about 67% of leagues, right? So in about 33% of leagues, he's available if you're looking for some wide receiver help this week. The other obvious ones are both Josh Palmer and Quinton Johnson. Who
Mhm.
work alongside the aforementioned Mr. Lad McConkey and the Chargers offense. But if you're looking for now, Lad McConkey has also been, he's had a questionable tag applied to that shoulder injury that he suffered last week. Now, he
Oh.
came back into the game after getting his shoulder looked at last week, and he came back in and he lit it up, right? He was
Oh, he was
awesome.
crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, we won
But
that game for them.
he has been questionable later in the week, and the questionable tag was applied as late as Thursday and Friday. So,
Oh.
Lad McConkey owners need to watch that. And if he's one of your primary flex or even your wide receiver two for this week, they're playing in the Monday night game. So if he does get pulled from the lineup as a result of that injury,
Huge
you're
loss.
gonna
Yeah.
you're gonna need someone to replace him, which is why Josh Palmer and Quinton Johnson make sense. Johnson's available in 50% of the leagues. Palmer's available in like over 85% of the leagues, and Quinton Johnson has seen a bit of an uptick in the number of
Yeah.
targets he's been receiving and his
Yes.
effectiveness lately. So anyhow McConkey wasn't in the lineup, I would imagine Quinton Johnson in that particular matchup against Baltimore would blow up. So keep that in mind.
Plus the Ravens' deep secondary is the worst in the league.
Mhm.
Any
Right.
receiver or tight end you have, you better get him to start versus the Ravens' horrible secondary. Thanks for reminding me. Oh my God.
Right. And the other one too, right? Another receiver to look at that's available in a lot of leagues. We mentioned him last week is Rashad Bateman for the Ravens, simply because he's a red zone target and frequently an end zone target. He's got about 4 touchdowns on the year so far on limited. He's limited looks, right? He doesn't have nearly as many opportunities as say Zay Flowers, but he's been very efficient on the ones he's received. So Rashad Bateman's another one to look at. In the tight end ranks, not a lot available at all. Disley again, we'll mention again based on the matchup. We mentioned him a couple of weeks ago. We've been out front on Disley. He's still available in about 50% of leagues. Hunter Henry's another one with a good matchup today against Miami, owned in about 47% of leagues. Isaiah Likely, again, with the volume that we may or may not receive in that Chargers game, he might still get some looks. And if you're looking to plug holes at tight end, it's possible, right? And the other one is Jonnu Smith is still somehow available in
I was
33%
gonna
of
say
leagues for Miami. Man, that
that.
guy's been on a tear since week
Baller.
6. Yeah,
Baller.
one of the best tight ends in all of fantasy. So he's still surprisingly available in 33% of the leagues.
Him and
At
Tua,
quarterback,
man, is gonna be really, really good. Him and Tua, they're on a run right now. So
yeah,
get him.
yeah, no, really, really solid production out of Jonnu at tight end. At quarterback, Tommy Cutlass DeVito for all the reasons we mentioned earlier. Just why not, right? The matchup is great. The matchup going against Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay gives up points to quarterbacks and receivers by the bucket. So,
Mhm.
you could do worse if you're looking to, if you play in a 2 quarterback league and you got somebody out on bye this week, right? I mean, you could do worse, right?
Absolutely.
As we've mentioned in previous episodes, right? Josh Herbert, fantastic schedule going down the stretch. Geno Smith has been a top 12 playing quarterback, and he's available like in over 30% of the leagues. Bo Nix is available in 30% of leagues, believe it or not. So those are good plug and plays for this week if you need help at quarterback. On defense, Miami is only 68% owned and probably has one of the best matchups this week versus New England. But you know what? New England also has one of the best matchups this week against Miami.
Yes, they do. Yes, they
That's
do. It goes
ironic.
both ways.
They're both green light matchups against each other. That's fascinating and also widely available. Washington, Denver, Tampa Bay, Arizona, Houston, and Chicago all have decent matchups when it comes to going against teams that produce a fair number of points on defense, right? So those are all teams that have good, solid matchups. Okay, so that's pretty much what I have to say when it comes to fantasy football, except to just simply reiterate to fantasy managers, start paying attention
Yeah,
to your playoffs. If you're going to make the playoffs or even your consolation rounds, if you're one of those guys who plays it right to the end, take a look at the schedules of your players right now. Take a look at the matchups they have. It happens where you've got a player who's been bang up all year long, been wonderful, but yet for some reason, they've got a terrible matchup week 15 or 16. All I'm
yeah,
saying is that, like, look for backup provisions. Look for alternative plug and plays in there that might be viable. Now, if one of those guys is Saquon Barkley or Hill, like you're not going to
yeah,
not play those guys, right? But I'm talking about your RB2 matchups and whatnot, right? Take a close
right,
look, right? Is Chuba Hubbard going up against Tampa Bay, or is he going to have a matchup against KC or some team like that, right? So
right.
matchups matter. Green lights matter in fantasy. So just, yeah, to the managers out there, all I say is like crunch time's coming up. If you make your playoffs or you play your consolation rounds hard, start taking a look at week 16 and 17, who's playing who, and start taking a look at what type of schedules your peripheral players have going down the stretch. You know, the guys you put in as your backups as for injuries, or the guys you put in as your flex plays. Start taking a look
Right.
at, in particular, your flex players, your bench players that you have. Like if you have bench players that have nothing but red light matchups, why are they on your bench? Find somebody else with better matchups. So that way, if you do have somebody in your starting lineup that gets injured, at least the guy you're going to throw in there has green light matchups. You've already taken care to ensure of that.
Definitely, definitely. And some quick fantasy starts and sits from me. Gonna sound controversial, but I'd sit Jonathan Taylor here. They're facing Detroit today. It's gonna
Yep.
be very tough for any running back to do anything against that amazing defense. Definitely start Terry McLaurin today, because
Yeah,
they're facing the
dude.
Dallas Cowboys. Massive, 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 massive upside on that.
Scary
Plus
Terry
Dallas
has a big
Cowboys.
game today and
Oh,
a
it's gonna be
bounce back
massive.
game. He had a
Yes.
shutdown performance last week. He got unlucky. He had a shutdown corner last week who did their job. He only
Oh,
got 1.5 points last week. He's coming back with a vengeance this week. Look for it. Book it.
oh,
Bank it.
book it. That might win you your matchup because that Dallas team does not care. One
Yep.
thing that another guy, if you really need a quarterback, Drake May has been on a small little roll right now. He's
Drake
still being
Mays.
played, but
Drake Mays the
he-
truth,
he-
man.
he's available. I guarantee you, he's available. Somebody has now picked up on this Drake May guy, and
Oh
also
yeah, no, he's available.
he's available. He could surprise Miami. He can throw that thing. So that's just my personal starts and
I
sits.
have a feeling
You
that
know what?
Miami New England game is going to be interesting. Just it's a
Yeah.
classic historical matchup. It's a divisional matchup. I don't think Miami runs away, even though Miami's at home. I don't think Miami runs away with it. The gorgeous weather down in Miami only benefits New England. Like I have a feeling it's going to be a frustrating game, unexciting and messy. But I don't think anybody runs away with it, and I think it goes down to the last 4 minutes in the fourth quarter.
Oh, it's going down to the wire. It's going down to the wire.
Yeah,
I got that circled as a game that I might watch in the fourth quarter. I'm not
yeah.
watching it for the first three, bro. I'm just
No,
gonna
no. The first three are going to be ugly and messy.
it's gonna be very messy, very ugly. But I'm telling you, that fourth quarter might be like the witching hour, as they say on NFL Red Zone. It's gonna be
Yeah,
really dope. But I know
yeah.
why y'all here. Y'all are here to hear from Unc. about overtime. This is the best segment of the show. Yeah, I might even clip this in the future, bro. I might like make a whole clip out of it. We got to
Well,
talk
thank
about
you.
the history of black coaches in the NFL, man, and maybe the front office or something like that. How that has evolved over time. And I love Unc for giving us that history, man. He's such a great mind on the history of football, man. I could hear him all day. Unc, go ahead. No time limit. Go do your thing. Cook. What are your thoughts?
Well, man, yeah. Well, the Rooney Rule is named after Art Rooney Sr. for the Steelers. And what it was is that for a lot of years, of course, as we've discussed in previous segments on this show, we've talked about the dearth of quarterbacks, African American quarterbacks. Well, it should be of no surprise that further up the food chain, amongst the general managers, the coaching ranks, and certainly the owners, that there's very few African Americans, even fewer than there are quarterbacks, right? So this again presents us with this situation where, are there ceilings for African Americans in a league that is comprised 75% of African Americans, right? And how untenable that looks, and how it's a bad look for the NFL in general. So and of course exposes them to legal liability, right? I mean, it's a closed club. It's a private circle of wealthy, largely white owners, right?
Right.
The only people of color in the ownership circle are international people. I think the owner of the Jaguars.
Yeah, come on. Yeah. Con.
Yeah, right. But I mean, here you're talking about a global individual who's got wealth, that far and exceeds generally, his demographic, etc. So it's a different kind of thing, right? Money talks,
Yeah.
and bullshit walks in the ownership ranks. So, anyways, the Rooney Rule came as a response to a particularly bad situation in 2002, in which there were only two African American head coaches in the league, Tony Dungy and Dan Green in Minnesota. Green in Minnesota had been on a 10-year winning streak. He was kind of like Tomlin, right? He had been 10 years without losing seasons and whatnot. Well, he finally fell into a season where they had gone like 5-10. And so Minnesota fired him. And in Tampa Bay, Tony Dungy had been he'd taken over the head coaching position in '96. And he had done a fairly good job. He sort of turned the franchise around, which had sort of fallen back into its perennial losing ways. And he turned the franchise around by focusing on defense. In fact, he innovated what people call now the cover two defense, which he admits he stole from his days in Pittsburgh. Anyway, so innovative coach with a fair degree of success, but not quite enough. Now, I have a personal reflection on this. As much as the Tampa Bay firing of Dungy sort of looks bad in the context of the dearth of African American coaches in the system, I remember being in Florida at the time. And there was this feeling in with regards to the Tampa Bay franchise that Dungy was very good but not great. And it was based on the fact that they kept going to the playoffs. They kept challenging for the championship, but not actually succeeding. And so a lot of people very cynically point at Gruden the next year, because Gruden got hired away from the Raiders. And
Yes,
he
got
came into Tampa Bay and immediately won a Super Bowl.
Right away,
Won a Super Bowl where Dungy had struggled for 6 straight years. And a lot of people said, well, there you go. He had the it factor that put them over the top. And it was really kind of hard to argue against that, to be quite honest with you. That Dungy was good, but not it gets said about so many sports people that they're like, we talked about Dan Marino the week before, about how he was good, but not great because he couldn't win the big one when they had to. And so, I'm giving the NFL just a smidgen of a break here because I was actually in Florida at that time. And the last thing I ever heard from anybody was, well, what do you expect? Look at the coach. right? When it came to
Oh,
those
yeah.
failures, nobody said that, right? Everybody had great respect for Tony Dungy. They just kind of
Right.
felt like, maybe like he wasn't a loser, but he wasn't a winner. Put it that way.
In a
Whereas,
way, that's kind of good. That's kind of good because you're looking at him as a coach, not as his skin color. You're judging him by what he's
right,
putting on the field, which is a good thing. Judge him by
yeah,
the field, not his skin color, right? I
but
think so. That's a good thing.
in the
Yeah.
overall context of a lack of head coaches in the NFL, 2002 looked really bad because you'd think of the number of white coaches that continue to get recycled and not fired.
Right.
It just
Right.
looked really bad, and it was also coincidental that
Mm.
Rooney was at the same time running what was called like a council for hiring or diversity or whatever it is in the late 90s anyway. So they were aware of the situation to
Mhm.
begin with. And so when that situation came to a head in 2002, the league was actually sued by Johnny Cochran, Johnny Cochran of
What?
OJ fame. Yeah. And another
I'm
person.
done.
Yeah, over hiring. It wasn't really like a big lawsuit, but it was just kind of meant to be like another form of advocacy, and it kind of
Yeah.
prompted the NFL to make an official rule out of it, and they called it the Rooney Rule. And it said
Okay.
basically that, in fact, I'll write from the NFL website. I'll read you what the Rooney Rule is. The Rooney Rule encourages hiring best practices to foster and provide opportunity to diverse leadership throughout the NFL. Now, to me, that could have been ended. You could have ended that sentence after the word practices. Rooney Rule
Right.
encourages hiring best practices. You could have left it right at that,
Yeah, of
right?
course.
And by best practices, what we mean is diversity. And
Yeah,
by
of course.
diversity, I don't mean what is pejoratively referred to as affirmative action, because it
Yeah.
implies that you're giving somebody a break, you're giving somebody of lesser talent an affirmative hand up, right? No, no. What diversity and what is derisively called diversity, equity, and inclusion now, what people are calling DEI
DEI.
hires, the whole idea is
Yeah.
to make the corporate structure draw from all the talent available and try
Yes.
to eliminate obvious biases which are obvious because there are no African American coaches. How can 75% of the players be black and
Yes.
none of your coaching ranks? Are you really, as a league, as a corporation, are you going to really stand there and tell me that the talent isn't available? Right.
And
Are you
it's
going to sit there
available.
and
Yeah.
are you going to sit
Crazy.
there and tell me that something else is at work besides bias? How do you end up with a lily white management structure
Yeah.
throughout the
Yeah.
league? It seems
Oh,
absolutely impossible, especially when you've got a guy like Ozzie Newsome who's been functioning at that level for 3 decades and doing
yeah.
fantastic work, right? So it doesn't add up. And so the league got sued by advocate groups and whatnot and pushed to this position whereby they said that anytime you've got a head coaching hire that comes up now, you have to interview a person of color.
Right.
And so
Right.
they did that, and they did that. And of course, the system got gamed, right? Owners that
Yes.
resisted that trend would, sure, go ahead, tick the box and hire the guy, but he's not serious, right? So the
Yes.
Rooney Rule has actually expanded over the years, right?
Right.
Again, when we talk about point counterpoint on the field, the same thing happens with management and owners, right? Because the
Yeah.
NFL seems to be earnest in their desire to have their ownership rank, or not their management ranks and their head coaching ranks reflect the overall trends throughout society, because it puts you in a position where you have to explain why the big house don't have no people from the fields, right?
Oh,
And
that's
they're sick
right.
of it's a bad look. It looks terrible. Not to mention the fact that corporations have proved throughout America that diversity is not just a feel-good thing. It actually yields results. When people
Oh,
are
yes, of
forced,
course.
when people are forced to choose from the vast array of talent out there, lo and behold, surprise, surprise, miracle of miracles, it turns out that there's a lot of diamonds in the rough out there that turn
Oh,
out
yeah.
to be fantastic hires when given the opportunity. And that is
Yeah.
exactly what the Rooney Rule is about. So they've actually expanded the rule to the quarterback rooms, like the quarterback coaching rooms and the
Yeah.
coordinator rooms, because this is how they used to do it in the past, right? This is how they
Mm.
got away with hiring only white coaches. There's a
Yes.
pipeline, no matter how you do it, pink, yellow, brown, polka dotted, wherever you were born, however you were born, there is a pipeline for the coaches, an established coaching pipeline for head coaches that says that you go through the coordinator positions. Offensive,
Right.
defensive coordinators are usually the ones that are always promoted to head coach. Well,
Right.
especially a lot of those offensive coordinators get their start in the quarterback's room as the quarterback's coach. Witness O'Connell in Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota, for example. So how they
Right.
got around that is a lot of African Americans were simply never hired as coordinators or quarterback coaches,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Because if you make sure that none of those guys none of those guys will end up being head coaches because they didn't pay the price of being an offensive defensive coordinator, right? So
Right. Right.
very slick way of getting around it, right? So of course the Rooney
Definitely.
Rule has now been extended to the offensive and defensive coordinator positions and the quarterbacks coaches because those are traditional pipelines for head coaches, right? So and
Right.
they've also expanded it to include now women being interviewed for coaching positions.
Right.
So the
Right.
Rooney Rule has actually proven to be a very effective when used properly, and that is the criticism. The only real criticism of the Rooney Rule is that the NFL doesn't use it to its maximum potential.
Oh yeah.
That they tolerate people, using ways, loopholes to get around it, right?
Mhm.
So the NFL has responded to that by saying not only one, but now you have to interview two head coaching
Oh.
candidates, and they have to come from outside, and they have to come from outside the organization,
Oh, I
right?
didn't know that.
So
I didn't know. That's pretty cool.
yeah, the Rooney Rule keeps getting tweaked and tweaked and tweaked as the years go by, as more and more scofflaw NFL owners and management try to get around the Rooney Rule, right?
Right.
So
Right.
which goes to show you A, how effective it is when used properly, and B, that there really is a problem that needs to be addressed. Owners
Oh
are
yeah. Absolutely.
actively trying to not hire these people, right?
Right.
So, nothing shows you why the Rooney Rule is more necessary than the actions of the owners themselves. And the Rooney Rule has in fact been adopted by a variety of other corporations, from Facebook to large top tier banks in the US. A
Mhm.
lot of corporate structures have adopted the Rooney Rule as a way of addressing their own DEI issues. Right. So, despite the political climate right now that is very upset with what they consider to be affirmative action and DEI initiatives, and they're calling it woke and all these other type of bastardized terms. But the reality is that these programs are effective, and they are regulatory, and they are designed to address a situation that, for lack of a better word, has simply manifested itself. Right? Nobody wants to come right out and say this is a racist structure, this is a racist system, right? Because that's not popular. That's it's America. America doesn't like definitive words like that. So instead, that they've had to try to take this other end around way of trying to get around the new regulatory structure. And so, like I was saying earlier, that came to a bit of a head in 2010 and 2012, and that's why they expanded the Rooney Rule to make it at least two candidates, and at least one of them has to come from outside the organization, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, the NFL is trying very hard. Now, it has a very mixed record on that. You could
Yeah.
easily argue that in 2020, that the NFL only had three African American head coaches. Well, they had
Mhm.
two when the Rooney Rule went into effect. So you're telling me that after 20 years, you've only got one extra? Well, as of right, that was a bit of a blip. As of right
Mhm.
now, there are 9. So you would have to say
That's
that the
what's
Rooney
up.
Rule is accomplishing what it set out to do. And I
Mhm.
think it could do even more if the NFL was more committed to its use and its
Yeah.
application. Because the only team that's ever been fined, and they
Mhm.
were fined about $200,000. The only team that's ever been fined is Detroit, and that was way back in 2003
Oh
when there was
wow.
that controversy over the Marty Morningweg hire. and
Mm-hmm.
Detroit got caught, just simply not hiring people, right? Saying that, because
Right.
they hired, I think they hired Mariucci, but they put the word out there that Mariucci was going to get hired. So the black
Yeah,
candidates that had lined up to interview for it
they're
all
like,
threw
nah.
up their hands and said, well, Mariucci's going to be hired. So Detroit tried to hang their hat on that, but they still got fined for it, right? But since then, in the 20 years since then, not a single
Yeah.
owner has been fined for an abuse of the Rooney Rule,
No, that's
right?
good. That's very good.
Well, it is. Is it good, or is it because is it a lack of enforcement, or is it because everybody's been complying? I think 2012,
Oh, yeah,
2013 would
yeah,
tell you that people are just good at not complying, and that the NFL is reluctant to make them comply or to call them
yeah,
out on it. But
yeah,
instead of calling them out on it, instead what they do is they keep expanding the Rooney Rule scope and reach, right?
yeah,
So yeah, because these are all polite gentlemen, and nobody wants to call anybody names in word or deed, right? But
yeah,
that's what's happening. So kudos to the NFL for the Rooney Rule. We've seen its effectiveness. The one coach that people might point to say, "Oh, there's the Rooney Rule in action." That just goes to show you that Mike Tomlin would never happen without the Rooney Rule. But let me give you a bit of let me give you a little anecdote that Pittsburgh is very anxious to point out every time anybody says that, as they tick their own Rooney Rule box by interviewing Ron Rivera before
Yes,
they
interviewed
hired
Ron
before they
Tomlin.
hired Tomlin. So Pittsburgh's
Yes, they
quick to
did.
point out that they hired Tomlin on his own efforts,
Yes,
on his own merits, and that he's been a wonderful hire since. But nevertheless, Tomlin is the poster child for
yeah,
what an African American quarterback, when given the chance, can do. Because Tomlin's on an epic run. We talked about him as coach of the year. We've talked
oh,
about him having 15 straight years of winning without a single losing season. He is by all measure the poster child for continuity and success at the NFL level. And oh, by the way, just as an aside, he's also a black man. Right.
there you
So
go. There you
that's what you
go.
want. You want to get to that place where that's just an aside.
Yes, and you know what? I'm telling you right now, if you just want to be judged literally by your quality of work, man. You don't want other factors coming into this. I want y'all to like this stream and like what we're doing here because of the quality of what we're doing, not because we black, white,
Not
and
because Unc is so good looking.
yes, let's do it. Let's do it. And fix it up for JL's eyes. It's okay too. You know what I mean? So you gotta go by the
Right.
quality of the actual product and the
Yeah.
individual rather than things that they have no control over or things that are, just superficial like gender or race. So I think that's the essence of the Rooney Rule, and I really like it. We have
Well,
now, I'm telling you right now, if we look at the league right now, I think it's going in a great direction. Some of the best coaching candidates are black. Look at Aaron Glenn from the
yeah.
Detroit Lions. Look at Brian Flores, what he done to Minnesota. These
Yeah.
are candidates who are being judged by the quality that they're putting in their work rather than their skin color. Go ahead.
Well, let me finish with this, right? I
Mm.
have always said, pardon me, it has always been said that you cannot legislate morality. And that's true. That's true. You can't make people feel a certain way. You can't make people think a certain way. But you can
Right.
regulate people's behavior.
Yes, you
if you
can.
just
Yes, you can.
if you just acknowledge that a situation exists and you're done with trying to argue justifying why opportunity should be out there. Like there's
Mhm.
an old saying that says that folk ways are like water on a rock. Like that's how they change in
Mhm.
slow incrementalism. And we've seen that time and time again, right? So
Right.
every now and again, like you may not be able to legislate morality, but you can sure enough regulate behavior, right? And if you just put the hammer down and said, look, we're sick of this. We got a situation we have to address. We're of the belief that quality African American coaches exist out there, and that as a league, we believe that they should be given an opportunity. And we have seen time and time again that y'all aren't going to do it unprodded. So here's the prod.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Definitely.
kudos to the NFL for bringing in the prod. They may not have used it, as stringently as they could have possibly, but it's obvious that they've served as a role model for the rest of corporate America, and it has shown you what is possible when you intervene. Now, you're going to have your naysayers out there, and this
Yeah.
is what I hate the most about these conversations: is the naysayers out there that say that the quality of the overall product is compromised because you're forcing people to choose lesser talents. And I hate this aspect of the discussion, the
Yeah. It's
assumption
bad.
that the people that have been left off the
Hmm.
promotions and the good positions and all that stuff at all levels of America, the assumption that these people have never ascended is because they're of lower talent.
That's
I
horrible.
hate
That's so
I
dumb.
hate that supposition, right? As opposed to being
Yeah.
held back by you. Right?
Oh
It's like,
man. No.
right, like we all know when we read the history books what has happened, that certain people have been held back, and
That's
that
a
given the
fact.
opportunities to redress that situation on their own, not coincidentally, the people that held you back did not embrace the opportunity to provide new opportunities in a different paradigm. So I'm sorry. You've got, we offered you the carrot. The only thing you responded to was the stick, right? And
Yeah.
so, but
Yeah.
when forced to do so, amazing things happen, right?
Oh,
You
yeah.
get innovate every time you expand the talent pool and include people that you have not included before. There is always an uptick in innovation, creativity, and productivity because these people are getting a chance that have not had a chance before. It only
Mm.
makes sense logically that when you expand the talent pool, you expand the level of talent.
Oh, absolutely, man. And look at this. I'm gonna show you guys three examples right now. Look, this is D'Amico Ryans currently coaching the Houston Texans. This is good. I'm gonna put him right now. Mike McDaniel's coaching currently the Miami Dolphins right here, and the recently fired Robert Sala. What do they all have in common? Okay, they're all minority head coaches. What else do they have in common? They all coach. I know Mike McDonald doesn't look like he's half black. I know it's surprising, but it's
He's
true.
mixed. Yeah, dude is mixed.
He's mixed race, yeah. But what do they all have in common? Oh, they all coached for the Niners. And guess what happens? If you were on an assistant coach with a team and you get hired to another team, that team, which is the Niners in this situation, gets picks and some other
Yeah.
complementary aspects.
Third
That's an
round picks.
expansion of the Rooney Rule. So the Niners, I think, gamed the system in the opposite way. They had minority head coaches that they formed and they built and molded, who then coached, became head coaches in other teams, and the NFL rewarded them with picks.
That's right.
So that's the Rooney Rule used in a positive way, I get it.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
So
and
that
and
was
that's
really
what
smart.
and
Yeah,
that's what it's intended to do, right? Much like the
just about.
tax
Yeah,
code, much like the tax code for a nation is intended to encourage certain behavior, right?
yes,
RSPs are intended to have Canadians save for their retirement. IRAs in
yeah,
the United States, it's the same thing. If we offer you a tax break, if you have 4 kids versus two, right? And if it's a big enough tax break, that might influence your behavior when it comes to how many children you have. So it's the same thing with the Rooney Rule. That's right. If you develop talent in under the auspices of the Rooney Rule, and that
right.
talent goes on to
Mhm.
a certain designated level within management, then you,
Yeah,
as a franchise, for having developed that talent, get a draft pick. That's correct. So yeah,
yes,
if
yes.
San Francisco has gone into the business of developing minority talent for coaches, they could find themselves with an eighth draft pick every year if they're good at it.
Oh
They get
yeah,
rolling, right?
and they have benefited from it definitely, man.
And
Minority coaches that they've got to other teams, and they've gotten a ton of draft picks.
and
John Lynch knows what he's doing, and it's a
well, and that's
look
a
look at the
sign of it.
Niners. They're always competitive, always competitive. There's a
That
reason.
is a sign of intelligent policy when you can
Yeah.
encourage changes of behavior
Mm.
without using the carrot instead of the stick to encourage changes in behavior. That's an intelligent policy change.
It's a very intelligent policy change, and I'm telling you right now, it don't matter about your skin color. Can you coach the guys? And let me
Yeah, man.
we've seen what happened to the Jets. I think the Jets are like 1-6 after Salah got fired. Crazy, but true. They are horrible. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It
no,
obviously wasn't the coach.
it's
D'Amico Ryan's in Houston, one of the
this
best teams in the
season.
league. You know what I mean?
This season, in a way, the season's been full of surprises for New York, but
Yes.
in a way, none of it is surprising. Everything that's
Yes.
happened in New York this year is the most New York Jets thing ever. I'm sorry. I couldn't have predicted the details, but I could
Yeah, man.
easily have predicted that this would happen to New York this year. When people were predicting them for playoff success and whatnot, I was just like, yeah, but the New York Jets. And then they would say this and they'd say that. And they'd say this. And I'd be like, but it's the New York Jets. Unfortunately, we're at that stage with the New York Jets.
And Jay, me as your co-host, I have to eat crow. I definitely fell for it. I'm one of them guys, but guess what? We're gonna finish off this way. The New York Jets might have a little reunion. We're gonna talk about this next week. This guy might be coming back.
Are they really entertaining the Rex Ryan request?
They
He wants to.
actually are. We'll talk about it next week on the back end. I'm giving y'all a little
All
sneak
right.
peek
All
of what
right.
y'all
All
gonna
right. So I'm
see.
going to bone up on my Rex Ryan this week. That's cool. I love Rex Ryan.
It's gonna be a fun watch, y'all. As I say, if y'all watching the replay, like the stream. Appreciate y'all for coming in, tuning in with us, man. We had a time. Appreciate Unc for the history of the Rooney Rule and giving us the game about society, actually. And that's what I love about OT. Unc is giving us knowledge and wisdom and perspectives that we don't usually see. And that's why we have this show, man, to give y'all not only the entertainment, but also the knowledge. You know what I
But
mean?
certain things, certain human behaviors are universal, no matter what their ecosystem that they're operating
Yeah.
in.
Yes, sir. And on that note, man, we appreciate y'all for coming in to Unc and Few, man, as we prepare for the games. Appreciate y'all for tuning in, man. It's been Unc, it's been the nephew, and we out.
One love, y'all. Peace.
Yes, sir.